Welcome to Real Talk. I'm Michál. This is Joe. Joe, I'd like to know how risky you consider yourself.
Risky?
Like, scale of 1 to 10, how much of a risk taker are you? Like 10 being throw all caution to the wind.
It depends on what it is. Like risk with my body,
Maybe.
risk with
All
my
right.
money.
I'll throw some scenarios
risk
at
with
you.
leadership, risk like what?
Yes, all of that. So, driving down the highway, running a little late, light turns yellow. Are you going to hit the gas or are you going to hit the brakes?
Absolutely gassing.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, punching it through. Oh yeah,
Okay.
yellow is a suggested.
Dream vacation, 5-star resort, ridiculously cheap deal, but during peak hurricane season.
No.
Book it.
No.
Dream house on a lake. You're in a bidding war with someone else. Would you waive the inspection to get that edge?
No.
All right, so I'm reading you like a
I'm
five.
conservative. I'm conservative on those kind of like. Yeah, I don't take those kinds of risks.
What
I'm
kind of
pretty
risks do you take?
calculated. Oh, like I'll punch it through a yellow light. I'll jump off something.
So
I'll-
bodily things you're
Yeah,
okay with.
in my mind, low risk. Where if I was gonna die, that's really not high risk because I go to see Jesus. Like it's no big deal. Like I'm gonna die,
All right.
But like something financial or something I can't.
You're gonna think that through a little more.
Yeah, and like honestly, I don't want to stay in a hotel or in a house that could have the cooties and like be a. I don't want to be like gullible and sucked into some kind of deal that is a sham, and then I'm like, crap.
But
why
you
did I-"
are okay getting cooties, just to clarify?
No, I'm not.
Oh,
I don't.
okay.
I do. I'm high preventative on cooties, so I would rather spend. I would like that kind of thing. I'd be like the hotel or the Airbnb. I'd be so afraid I was being scammed,
Right.
and I would be stuck in a crappy Airbnb
Yeah.
that I would be like, no, I don't want to do that. Are you high risk?
Yeah, of course it depends on the situation, but
Bodily risk? You'll take a high bodily risk?
I think that has changed throughout my lifetime. And again, it depends on the situation. Like it shifted a little bit after I had kids.
Oh,
Yeah.
motherly instincts.
Yeah.
I mean, or
Trying
as
to
you've
stick
gotten older,
around a little bit.
you know, you getting older, these things happen.
Right, which is why I thought it'd be good to have this conversation with you since you are older and wiser. That's another topic. Let's specifically talk about taking risks for Jesus. So you hear that phrase, what do you think of? Because I think the average person probably jumps to like the big picture. They think that's
Taking a risk
taking
for
risks
Jesus?
for Jesus.
Is that even possible? Like, what are you talking about?
Well, I think most people start thinking about missionaries and people who live in countries where they're
Oh,
persecuted
kind of
for
like
their faith.
doing something extreme because you, or what could be perceived as extreme because of your faith in Jesus?
Well, let's talk about that. What are we talking about? What does that look like for the average person who lives in the United States, who lives in Pennsylvania, who lives right here in the Lehigh Valley? What does it mean
To take
to
a risk?
take a risk for Jesus, for your faith?
I don't know. That doesn't sound like it makes any sense to me.
I've stumped him, everyone.
I don't.
Let's all just
Is there
enjoy this
even a
moment.
risk that you can take for Jesus?
Well, let's look at some examples from Scripture. So I think
Let's do that.
let's do that. So I think there's definitely some bodily risks, if you will. So let's look at Rahab. She definitely put her safety, her family's safety,
Oh.
in order to protect Joshua's men. I think of risk when, how about risking reputation? How about Mary, risking
Okay.
her reputation? Or Noah, God asked him to build this whopping huge boat in the middle of nowhere and pile a zoo full of animals on it. Risks losing all of his friends, risks people thinking that he is remotely sane anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
How about Abraham takes a risk by packing up and leaving the only place he considers home, safety, leaving his country. Risks for Jesus?
Yeah. I guess there's a category of that. That's interesting. I mean, would those individuals,
Have
when they're,
considered them risks?
would they have like thought, now I'm about to take a risk? I think it's probably the hypothetical that's always interesting. It's like, okay, hypothetically speaking, would you do this or that for Jesus? It's really hard because if somebody said to me, I got to build a boat in Emmaus to save my whole, the zoo around me and my family, like, I'm not taking that risk.
Right.
But if God like communicated that to me and directly and it was like, this is what I want you to do, would I consider it a risk? I don't know. Would you?
I think any time that you're kind
Do
of
you feel
having
like
to weigh.
well, do you feel like you've been in positions and situations where you've had to take in your mind as you like, okay, I can look at the Bible. Give me an example in your life where you think you would put it in the category of I took a risk for Jesus.
Yeah, I think when you first think of the topic, I think the average person probably does think like, taking a risk for, I mean, just like you, it's like, no, I don't think of living my faith out daily involves risk.
Yeah.
But I think anytime that you're having to make that big decision, especially when you feel like it's been prompted by God, something he's laying on your heart,
Yeah.
I think, like anytime someone, let's put it back to Abraham and that having to
put it back to
move
Michál.
Oh, I will, maybe. Well, I'm thinking like there are people who have had to make that decision of having to pack up their family and move because God's prompted them to another. I mean, I've talked about this before about me feeling like I had this career path all lined up and him putting something in front of me that felt risky. I mean, it wasn't the original plan that I had. It certainly wasn't salary-wise comparable. There were definitely pieces of that I had to consider, even just what does that look like to work in a church where you want to go worship? So there, I think if at the time I probably didn't think, oh, this is risky. I'm doing this for Jesus. But when you look at some of those scriptural examples, then it becomes a little more relative that you can look at that and be like, oh, there were risks involved in that. And so I think anytime that you're weighing, could this happen or could this happen? And you're relying on God leading you in a certain direction, I think that's kind of what I'm thinking of. I think anytime that you are, probably the most relatable examples are anytime that you are risking your comfort level, what feels comfortable for you, and he's trying to push you out of that.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, maybe reframing it as sort of steps of faith that I'm willing to take that I can't see the outcome. I don't know exactly how it's going to end.
Right.
Don't know where it's
Feels
going to
risky.
lead. Feels risky. Okay, I get that. I mean, yeah, I think there's been situations in my life where I have stepped out in faith and trusted that God was going to guide and protect and lead, and I didn't know how. And that is, I guess, when you look at it that way, it's like, okay, yeah, I guess it's risky. And I could see how other people would look at it outside of me, someone else watching it, like my parents or my friends, not me or my wife, and go, what are they doing?
Right.
That seems risky.
Right.
I could see them seeing it.
Right. But
as
not
risky.
so much you in that moment.
Do I feel like it's risky in the moment? Like, I feel like it's weighty. I feel like it's like you're weighing out the pros and cons. Have I heard you, God? Is this surely what you want me to do? Asking and wanting assurance that it's going to be okay. Like, I've had those moments where it's like, is it going to be okay, God? Is it going to be okay, Karine? Like, are we going to be okay? It's like, we know we got to do this. This is the right thing, but are we going to be okay? And I know my parents have scratched their heads and thought, boy, what are you doing? Like, this seems crazy.
Right. So tell me this. I think if you think of yourself, your life in stages, and how you were at each one of those stages, how you would rate yourself as a risk taker. So Joe as a 7-year-old versus Joe as a 13-year-old. Joe as a 17-year-old. Joe as a guy in his mid-20s who has a couple babies in his hand. Would it be fair to say that at each of those stages, your willingness to enter risky situations probably changed over the years?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And in what direction?
If we're categorizing this as I'm willing to step out and do things that God wants me to do because I know it's what he wants me to do, then I think I've increased my risk. And things that probably unnerved me when I was younger in my walk with Jesus and things that I would do now versus things I would have done then, I think I would probably step out and do more now than I would have done in the past.
Yeah, think of what you think of as risks when you're 10, 11, 17 years old. And I would say probably on average, as you grow into adulthood, you're probably less inclined to take those risks, but how that contrasts with how you mature as a believer. And when we're talking about a different type of risk that, should we should our willingness actually go in the other direction?
Willingness to step out and trust. Yeah, I mean, I would think as you mature in your walk with the Lord, on one level you might take more risks, but you also might not see it as risk. I don't even know. Like, 'cause
And you would see it as what?
I don't know. Like, I'm thinking of some of the, we have some mutual friends that are older, more seasoned, more mature, that have been around sort of the block of life and ministry and parenting. And like, would they see their decision making as risk taking, or would they see it as the next step in their decision to follow
Yeah.
Jesus?
Yeah.
Would they even, and on one level, are they even, I don't know. It's like,
Yeah, I hear, like, what I hear you not saying is, like, it's this level of trust that starts to increase. So if you've been working your whole life to saving this nest egg for retirement, and yet God puts in front of you this opportunity to give more generously, does that seem risky when you're at this
when you're at a certain
level
stage.
of maturity versus does it seem like really just leaning in and trusting that he's nudging you in this direction for a very specific reason and that it will be okay?
But is it always just perspective, right? So if I had one of my older seasoned friends who are in their 60s or 70s and they were sitting here and we were talking to them, they would probably say, what you perceive as just my normal pursuit of faith was a little bit risky. I was stepping out in faith, even in that. So it's like, is there always a stepping out that all of us are taking if we're
at
growing?
any stage.
And whatever is perceived as someone from the outside, maybe, I don't know. I think as we grow and mature in our relationship with God, we trust Him more.
Yeah.
And therefore, in some ways, we would risk less and risk more. Meaning, on one level, we realize, like, we're really not risking anything of things that are important.
Right.
Right? We're really not risking anything, and we're willing to do anything and everything to follow Him.
I think, too, something you hit on there is, and if you look at these examples from the Bible, too, is the motivation and like the process of making these decisions. Like, these are people who had their proximity to God. They were close. They were having conversations. None of these risk-taking decisions were made haphazardly. They were in conversation with God. They were close enough that they could sense He was nudging them in certain directions, and they were typically made out of obedience. So hear this, that it's not, we're encouraging you to take risks that are out of greed or that are out of an adrenaline rush. But
Right?
it's like that proximity of God, that relationship to God, and helping you sense what He's asking you to do, but then taking these steps out of obedience.
I mean, there's definitely people in the Christian faith that seem to find joy and delight in taking risky, faith-based decisions. Or maybe in a different way, there's certain people that it's like they almost have like a martyr complex. Like, I have to pursue something hard because the harder, the better, and that will show my faith and my belief in following Jesus. Or I have to, if I have $100,000 in savings, like anybody does, but I don't know, I have $1,000 in savings, God really wants me to trust Him, so I'm going to give it all away. It's like, that, I don't think in the Bible we see that. We see, I'm going to walk with you, God. I'm going to listen to you, God. I'm going to follow you, God. And whatever you ask of me, I'm going to do. But I don't need to initiate risky,
Right.
like,
Yeah,
you
it
wouldn't
starts
say
to
to
go.
any mature person stop choosing risky things.
Right.
Follow, do the next right thing. And yeah, you want to jump out of a plane, like literally, like don't be risky about it. Be smart about it.
Right. Yeah, and I
Find
hear
the
that. Like,
best-
don't make it part of a checklist of things
Yeah,
to be.
find the best place you can jump out of a plane that's as safe as possible to eliminate as much risk as you can, and then jump out of the plane. The same in our walk of faith. Like, God, it's not like I wake up and go, you know what, I'm going to think that in 2022, let me take some risk for God. Like, really? Like, does God need you to take risks for Him? I think He needs you to trust Him and continue to walk with Him. And if He asks you to do something that might seem like a big, giant leap of faith, He's going to, but if you initiate that,
Right.
like you're going to test God and kind of see if He's going to provide, I'm going to step out in faith and go be a missionary somewhere. Like, if He didn't call you to do that, you're being stupid. And by the way, He's not going to provide for you the same way as if He calls you to go do something, and then he provides for you everything you need for that, versus you initiating that, because like
Right.
it's the spiritual, holy thing to do. No,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because again, what's your motivation
Yeah,
there?
It's like, I don't think God needs us to take risks for him. Does that sound weird?
So you don't think cooties for Jesus is a thing?
What do you mean, cooties for
I
Jesus?
don't know, like traveling to a third world country and
Oh, just pursuing lice for Christ? Like
Yes.
getting a head full of lice for Jesus is a thing? It's like, how about you go because God wants you to go and you're equipped to go and you're called to go and there's risk involved?
And you're
You
willing to sign up for that
I'll
risk,
sign up
but
for the risk, but
again-
I'm not pursuing the risk.
right.
Like, why? I'm pursuing God, and as I walk with him, he's going to be faithful, and I'm going to try my best to be faithful at that risk.
So what I hear in that is stay close to God.
Mm-hmm.
He'll present you potentially risky situations, but he's going to walk
Yeah.
you through it if you're
And-
walking next to him.
I don't think anybody wants a risque Christian.
Risky is never good.
Is that not what we're talking about?
That's a whole different Real Talk episode.
That'll be fun.
Thanks for watching. Why do I never know how to end these things?
You just did.